Welcome to Emotional Resilience, Living with the Fruit of the Spirit. I'm your host and author, Ron Ovid. You know, today we're on session 26. We're in a series called MindSkills, which is all about emotional regulation. And today we're going to be talking about using your imagination. Mind skills we've been talking about have been focused attention. It's really part of recognizing. We need to recognize when we're over-emoting, right? And it starts in the body. I mean, emotions are really sensations. They get you to move. That's the original meaning of emotion, to move. And so when we can start sensing it's happening on, and we do that through focused attention, then we can relax. So we talked about relaxation. We talked about grounding. We talked about breathing. And today, we're going to talk about a great gift that God has given us, and that is our imagination. What a gift. You know, when we fear, when we get angry, when we have high elevated emotions, a lot of times our imagination takes over. When I was a young child, I had a lot of fears, and one was of that monster in the basement. Now, I couldn't tell you what that monster looked like, but I can tell you I imagined it. And a lot of times we do that so we can fight a lot of the things that bother us emotionally with our imagination. God has given us that ability. You know, today, the computer sciences have been taking that kind of stance, right? With all the computer power that we have today and the increased memory systems, the growth of computer graphics, virtual reality is all the rage. I mean, you can be putting on the virtual reality equipment, and you can be, zip-lining down an Amazon jungle. You can be walking across between two skyscrapers. You can be in all kinds of things, and you can play games. You can do all kinds of things, and the brain takes it as if it's there. In fact, there's a whole new field of medicine called virtual medicine or medical extended reality. It's used for stress reduction, phobias, relaxation, for pain relief, PTSD, and even schizophrenia. Over 10,000 studies have been used, and they reveal that VR, they call it, right, virtual reality, has an uncanny ability to calm pain, steady nerves, boost mental health. And so it's a whole new field coming. But you know, with all we have in virtual reality, it doesn't compare to the brain that God has given us. It doesn't compare to the power of our brain. You know, in rewiring the brain with EMDR-based treatment, the book that Laurel Parnell wrote, she says this: we can access, strength, and integrate our pure potential and reservoir of resources by tapping into our imaginations. Many forms of therapy utilize techniques involving imagination and visualization to heal physical and psychological problems. Brain research has shown that when we imagine doing something, neurons in the brain are activated as if we're actually doing it. And she continues, she says, let's say that your client is anxious and unsettled, and you want to help her feel calmer and more peaceful. You might begin by asking her to close her eyes and go inside, and then bring to mind a time when she felt calm and peaceful. And she might remember then a time at the beach when she was a girl. And you ask her to imagine herself there. And you know, that desired memory network has been activated then by remembering that, and the client actually feels a sense of peacefulness. She used her imagination to locate stored positive imagination. And you know, we're going to be talking about different techniques that we can use our imagination with, that we can use our brain's networks to help us emotionally, spiritually, and even physically. You know, imagination can increase our awareness, emotional awareness. Remaining aware of how we feel emotional is really important. We need to know it's part of our recognition. And when we use the imagination to try to do something that we're trying to do. For example, we want to stop being angry at someone, so we're visualizing that, and we can then sense emotionally whether we believe it or not. And if we don't believe it, then we can stop, pause, start asking ourselves questions, start thinking why. So it's a good way to check in to see how we feel about something. Because there's no sense fooling ourselves, right? If we feel a certain way, we need to check it. We need to ask ourselves. We need to investigate. We need to be our own detectives. And we can use our imagination to help us be aware of that. And so we can make changes using our imagination. And we want to look at different ways that we can do that. The first way is that we can imagine desired behavior that leads to desired outcomes. Now, one of the favorite topics in pop psych is if you can perceive it, you can achieve it. I don't necessarily want to go that far because, I can perceive myself being a brain surgeon, right? But I don't know that I have that quality or the education or the desire to be a brain surgeon. I think it's better when we have a goal and then we start to perceive what we need to do to accomplish that goal. It's when I first heard about using imagination, it was many, many, many years ago. It was back when the Soviets started using visualization to train their athletes. And it became quite a phenomenon. It went through all the pop psych circles talking about how we can use our imagination from everything to motivation, to increasing performance, to even healing our body. It went to some extreme and it lost some popularity, but it's back now because we do know that visualization is a great tool. A high jumper, for example. Now, high jumper isn't going to sit there that's high jumping at 5 and 6 feet and imagine that they can jump 10 feet. I mean, no one has even come remotely close to that. That would be ludicrous, right? But if they're jumping consistently at 5'6", is it wrong to have a stretch goal of maybe 5'8"? Now, inches matter a lot in high jump, but they can visualize, and they'd be sitting there, and you can watch them sometimes. They're actually watching themselves jumping. A baseball player knows that when they miss the ball, they sit there and they visualize the pitch coming in, and they visualize themselves hitting it the next time. Visualization is important. We can use it, and we use it all the time. Sometimes we don't pay attention. And so we want to use it for desired outcomes by visualizing the different steps. We can also reimagine our emotional reactions to things. Emotions can be difficult to change. Fear, for example. We can use it in phobias, right? We can imagine ourselves. If we're afraid of dogs, we can imagine a dog that someone else has that's friendly, and we can imagine it coming closer to us. And we do this systematic approximation, if you will. And we can use visualization to really help us sense that. It works. Have you ever watched some of those extreme sport videos and the skateboarders, going down, he jumps up and he's going down a rail and then he falls? When they fall, don't you go, oh, like that, just as if what? You skinned your knee, right? I mean, our brain is able to take that. Try biting into a lemon, right? Well, you can visualize a lemon, and when you do, you'll feel your lips kind of puckering and that kind of sour taste. Imagination is a great tool. And when we have things that we want to work on, we can use visualization, for anxiety relief, helping us with stress relief, with pain. We can help with stop smoking and social anxiety, with anger, sleep. Anything that we want to do, we can start to visualize doing it. With the help of God and with practice, different techniques, we can actually learn to improve our performance and what we're trying to do. A person that's, going to try stop smoking. I mean, nicotine is such a craving for them, right? Well, then they can imagine what it would be like not to do it and start relaxing the body. It would take a lot of mental rehearsal, but it can be done. And you can do that with a lot of things. Let's take advantage of using our imagination to work with our behavior. Well, the third thing is we can use it to correct misinterpretations and negative beliefs. We can go back to situations that over-aroused us, right? Perhaps we were just really despondent over something, or maybe we feel bad about us, ourselves, and we feel that we're damaged goods, we're no good. We can ask our body to go back to a time when we felt that way. We feel what it feels like, and we're able to go back to that. We can get to the root of it, and then we can start there and re-visualize what's the truth. What's the truth? They studied this for years, and back in 1969, they coined the phrase complex pattern matching system. And that's where, there's like a fingerprint on some of these things. And when I'm feeling a certain way and it's tied into 20, 30 years ago, or whenever you were a child, there's a pattern. And we're able to go back, and then we can work on that. We can ask ourselves in that memory, what am I feeling? What am I believing? What am I believing about myself in this memory? And then we can ask, what is the truth? And if you had a negative belief that you're defective, and defective things are disapproved of, and they're thrown away, and the result is I'll die, and you got this panic feeling, well, we can start imagining. We can imagine, right, that we are lovable, that we aren't broken goods. And that leads us into the next one. We can build capacity that we don't have. We can build a capacity we don't have. If you have a belief that you're unlovable, for example, why not visualize someone that has loved you in the past and revisualize that and keep building up this capacity to feel good about ourselves. I have in the lesson today that you can read about some case studies and that, and I encourage you, read the lessons. Read the lesson, go through it, answer the discussion questions. It's important. And if you don't have the lesson, you can write me at ron@empowerministry.org, ron@empowerministry.org, and I'll be happy to send it to you. And we can have the use of our imagination to help us think when someone did love us. Maybe it was a grandmother, and we can stop and visualize that. Maybe it's a God. We can visualize God loving us. We can visualize our own wiser self, how we would love someone else, right? We need to have self-compassion. The imagination's a powerful, powerful tool, and we can use that. Now, in the lesson, I also talk about adding bilateral stimulation. And this is a technique that they've been using in EMDR for a long time. And Getting Past the Past is a famous book by Dr. Shapiro, who founded EMDR. And she says this: once you have that safe or calm place, or once you're visualizing, for example, grandma saying how much she loves you, or you remember a time, even though your father may not have said much, but you remember a time when he smiled at you and he loved on you, and you take that and you can just see that he's loving you. Then they say you can add this bilateral stimulation. And she says this: once you have that safe place or calm place, there's a way that can help to increase the positive feelings by using bilateral stimulation with alternate tapping. However, it's important that you monitor your sensation and thoughts, and if they begin to change into something negative, stop and bring it back to the positive thoughts that you had. And she says, put your hands, and I'll move over a little bit, on your thighs, so you're sitting down, and you want to alternate, as you're sitting on your thighs, right? Just your tapping. And you can do that alternating tapping. And she says, put your hand on your thighs and tapping first one, then the other. When we concentrate on the safe or calm place, we can only tap slowly back and forth 4 to 6 times. That's about 5 seconds. We don't do long sets, and we don't do it very rapidly. Now, there's been other studies, and some people will keep doing it for a while. It's not so important. You don't need to do it the whole time, and you don't, it's not real fast. But this bilateral stimulation a lot of times helps really put it in to the brain. A famous neuroscientist was saying that what happens a lot of times is that this causes the brain to permit new emotional learning. And so there's something happening when we do this bilateral stimulation that it triggers a shift from an internal state to an exploratory seeking state, which involves an inhibition of the other things that we learned, and so therefore we can have a new learning. So it's kind of exciting. You can try it. You can try it. If it doesn't work for you, that's fine. But I did want to mention that because we can use everything we can use, right, to really use the imagination and the visualization to make these things real. Now, I wrote down a few rules for using your imagination. One is, it should be believable. I used the illustration earlier of trying to high jump 10 feet, right? That's more for a pole vaulter, right? But, trying to high jump that's not realistic. What we want to do is make it intellectually believable. The imagination isn't a genie's lamp. Now, I believe in stretch goals. I believe in having a growth mindset. So we should have goals. We should have something we should strive for. If we're constantly depressed, we want to visualize ourselves not being depressed. We want to visualize ourselves getting up in the morning with energy. That's a possibility. And so we want to have it believable, ownable, something we really want. And it must be credible. Right? It must be credible. And it should come from a meaningful source. So if you're starting to believe, right, that you're unlovable and you're going to have someone else say that you are lovable, then you're not just going to pick someone that you don't know. It's going to be someone that's credible, someone that knows you with all your foibles, right, and yet believes that you're lovable. And so it could be that grandmother, as we mentioned. It could be the father. It could be a teacher. And so we visualize, we use that. So it needs to be credible and a meaningful witness. And so we can recall past events and we can not change the event. I've heard of some people saying, if your dad, really used a harsh way of punishing you and slapped you, spanked you across the back of the legs and they bled, well, picture him giving you an ice cream cone. Well, that's okay, but I don't know that's going to change that memory. Instead, we go to even a harsh memory like that, and we can bring in God and ask him what he feels. And we can start to understand that, hey, it wasn't our fault. We didn't deserve that. Perhaps there's something wrong with our father because he did that we're lovable, that we're okay. And when we hear that from our own wiser self, when we hear that from God, maybe we invite, our loving grandma into that scene. We visualize that scene over again, not to change the scene, but to change the interpretation. You see, when we're a child, we believe certain things. A child can't blame the parents. A child takes it all internally. It's my fault. There's something wrong with me. But we're adults now. And we know when something like that happened, it wasn't the child's fault. Now, yes, maybe they painted, they drew on the wall with a crayon. But does that deserve that kind of punishment? No. And so we know that there must have been something wrong that caused that. Maybe father was in a drunken state and he couldn't beat his alcoholism. And we can learn to forgive, but the main thing is we can learn that in that thing we're still a precious child. And we can hear that from God. We can see our own wiser self coming in and telling our younger self. There's all kinds of ways to remedy some of the horrible interpretations we have of the past about who we are. And this is we'll get more into this when we talk about emotional relearning, because see, these things like we're damaged goods, I'm no good, those were emotionally learned. And it was in situations like that it was emotionally learned. And we can use imagination to go back and emotionally relearn. And we'll talk about that more when we get into that. And so, we enhance the memory by using all kinds of visualization, and we have sensory awareness where we're, really into it. Now, when we talked about relaxation, and breathing even. We used exercises that used visualization. Go back to those. Make sure you're increasing the sensory awareness, the smells, the sights, the touch, the tactical, all that. And make sure that you're increasing the emotional awareness of how it makes you feel. And then finally, I really like to use it, and I've kind of alluded to it already, but it's what I call relive and pre-live. So many times we try to do something and we don't use our imagination to help us pre-live it. If if we're going to go into a situation at work where we're a little nervous, pre-live it. Visualize, God with you there and that you're able to do it. Visualize the confidence. Visualize how ready you are. Visualize them being excited that you're there and you did such a good presentation. And there's a lot of applications for that, but you need to pre-live a lot of things and use that imagination. Picture yourself, if you have social anxiety, you need to start visualizing yourself having a good social experience, overcoming the negativity that someone may give you. You're not going to die, right, if someone doesn't like you. You're not going to die if someone scowls at you. Picture that, visualize that you can move on. And then there's the relive. So often we do something positive and it's one and done. Now, we know that we have a negativity bias. Our brain is wired that way, and it takes many positive experiences to change things. And so why not? When you succeeded, let's use the social anxiety. You practiced that, you went into the school, you were able to get to your locker, you went through the school day, and you had a good day. Visualize that again. When you get home, think about that. Think of what it felt like. Do it over and over. The brain will pick it up as if you're doing it all over again, and it will start to retrain the limbic emotional area of your brain to respond differently in the future. We underutilize our imagination. That's why I call it a mind skill. That's why I think it's so important. And so I put some exercises in the back of the lesson that you can look at and practice. I talked about a memory of overcoming anxiety. Even if you don't have anxiety all the time, you can practice that. And then there's a memory of being loved by others. Certainly, you can use that kind of an imaginative experiment for yourself. And then there's accomplishing a habit goal. Maybe there's something you're really trying to do and you're going to pre-live it and you're going to use your imagination. Imagination is a great tool that God has given us. It's one that can help us regulate our emotions in the present as well as in the future. We can re-examine situations and rehearse them in a different way. There's all kinds of things we can do with our imagination. So I encourage you, please, look over the lesson, start to think about this stuff, start to use this great tool that God has given you, and I think you'll find yourself becoming more and more emotionally resilient.